Good afternoon. Welcome on in to another episode of From Day One. Got a great court case for you today. Another one of the Dog Day cases. We thought it was done when the last one was concluded, but no. There's more. Normally I would go ahead and do a huge recap, but I'm going to actually let Mike do it, who's along with us. Mike from Law Talk with Mike. As he does a quite pretty decent little recap. Let's begin.
All those having business before the court draw near. The Honorable J. Cedric Simpson presiding.
Court does call the case of the people of the state of Michigan versus Catherine Null.
Okay, I guess I'll give one little preview in case anybody's new to this. This attorney, bottom center, fancies herself an animal rights attorney. As a result of that, she got her client, David Miller, top right, charged with a bunch of criminal charges. Now, he's gotten out of those because the judge made a finding that he was not the owner of the animals, and he really wasn't for the purposes that we're talking about. But she really just did some reckless things in my estimation in terms of that representation, and she just goes after the judge, and it's always kind of fun to watch. They get after each other again today.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Chief Assistant Prosecutor Victoria Burton Harris, appearing on behalf of the people.
And good afternoon, Your Honor. Sam Bernstein with on behalf of Ms. Null. Ms. Null, could you please say your name for the judge?
Hi, Catherine.
Ooh. Your Honor, can we just assume that's her?
Odd procedurally, because in Ms. Null's case, there was, so that procedurally we can look at this. Ultimately, there was a hearing back, I believe, in March. From
Yes,
that
Your Honor.
hearing, there was an agreement reached between the people and Ms. Null.
Yes, Your Honor.
Subsequent to that, there was a claim afterwards that, there was disputed ownership of the four animals.
Unfortunately, Your Honor, yes.
Court ultimately had a hearing on that.
Yes, you did, Your Honor.
And allowed all individuals who had an interest, believed they had an interest, to address the court regarding the dogs and the dogs' ownership. The court made a ruling. I ordered Mr. Bernstein to file an order with the court.
You did.
And after filing that order, he did so under the 7-day rule. I then received objections from the attorney for Mr. Millen, which not a party to this case.
Correct, Your Honor.
I then set this hearing for today. So I would ask you, Ms. Dunn, and I know that you're on these proceedings, what would give you standing to object to an order in the two cases, specifically that being case 221C 0728GC and 21F4?
I got this one. Nothing gives her standing. She does not have an appearance on file, and she has no basis whatsoever to file an objection on this.
You are correct. Yay.
But that's, not her position.
1365FY.
Your Honor, I had asked the court the last time we were in court, case numbers these orders were going to be entered under, and the court directed me that it would be all case numbers in which Mr.
That is not what this court said. That is absolutely not true. I said people were putting whatever case number they want, but I did not say it'd be on all cases.
You said for Mr. Bernstein, whatever case numbers he filed his motion on, that would be the case numbers in which the order was entered on. In fact, Mr. Bernstein, and I want to make sure I'm right before I say this.
You're not, so don't.
His order
That would be a first.
that
Oh,
was
my.
submitted under the 7-day rule included the cases that involve the case numbers that involve my client.
Correct. But his motion was not filed under that.
If Your Honor, let me grab the motion.
You should have already grabbed it.
Yes, mischaracterizing a judge's order is,
Stupid.
well, it's frowned upon.
Dumb. Ignoronic. Something you most definitely shouldn't be doing.
I apologize. It has 4 numbers on it. I'm not going to rule on that. I don't have that.
Dumb as fuck.
I don't have that in this case because Mr. Miller is not a party. So whatever caption error there is, that's fine. He only filed it in this case. This motion was not filed in any case involving Mr. Miller.
Your Honor, I'm sorry, I thought I had that motion right in front of me, and I'm searching for it.
Apologize for being stupid and sit down. I know you're not smart enough to do that, though.
Sam Bernstein has actually aged during the course of this case significantly.
Most of us have, Mike.
Well, the motion to dismiss for lack of subject matter jurisdiction was filed in the 928 case.
So I had black hair when this started.
I have it on the computer. Well, let me just ask you, Your Honor, then, is it your opinion then that Mr. Bernstein did not file the motion to enforce the order under the 928 GZ case?
I think Mr. Bernstein, and maybe we can clarify, Mr. Bernstein, my understanding is it was filed regarding no. If I'm wrong, then correct me, sir. Because hang on before you answer. The original order you're seeking to enforce was only in the no case.
That's correct, Your Honor. And when I filed the motion, I included all the case numbers because it seemed that we should just include everything because there was a lot of litigation involving all of it. At the end of the day, though, yes, the motion to enforce the order only regarded Miss Null's cases. And in order to enforce that order really only regarded Miss Null. The reality is what my motion had to do with had nothing to do with Mr. Miller. And so in order including all of these things about Mr. Miller was not something that I felt was necessary in drafting a proposed order finalizing my motion regarding what was really Miss Null's issues. And so at the end of the day, when we disposed of this case the last time we were together, it didn't really affect Mr. Miller, and the criminal case against him really still stands. I was really just trying to dismiss Miss Null's cases. And so...
All right, I'm doing this, and I'm leaving it because it's interesting to see them go back and forth through all this. Cases get confusing. There was a whole bunch of them. There's a township. There was a case against Miss Null, and then he ended up getting charged because he claimed ownership of the dogs. So you have this myriad of files, but it isn't that complicated. The order that they seek to enforce only involved Miss Null, not Mr. Miller. She never intervened on the case. I'm actually surprised that Judge Simpson is patient with this as he is. If I was a judge, I would just say, look, we're going to amend this, so that it only goes to the case involving Miss Null, and you don't have an appearance on that case. You don't get to say anything.
Yeah, so another shut up.
My court. That's what I would do. I would take the bull by the horns very quickly. Sam Bernstein, trying to, in an abundance of caution, listed all the case numbers just so that nobody could complain. So then Dunn turns around and uses that against him and saying, well, then I'm involved in it. It's irritating, but it's silly. It's the sort of thing that happens in court.
Back to
when
the
I
court.
read the proposed order by Ms. Dunn, it just includes a lot of things that weren't really the topic of the motion that I had originally filed, resulting in the ultimate order that's the topic of today.
Then why was I served, Judge? Why was I allowed to argue at the motion? It was clear Mr. Bernstein included my client because he had to have, and I understand the court's
Why were you served with what?
I was served with the motion to enforce the order. Ms. Null stated to the court on March 28th my client was an owner.
No, she may have stated that after the fact, after your client had indicated that they were her animals. But I'm not going to go back and relitigate that. I'm looking just procedurally that the order that this court is enforcing is only on the case involving Miss Null.
But the court can't enforce that order without an adjudication as to my client's rights.
Your client doesn't have rights.
Absolutely can.
Thank you.
I gave your client the opportunity to address the court, which goes to your next question. Every interested party in these animals was allowed to address the court. The court made its ruling.
And laughed at you because you're an idiot.
So I don't know where you say that your client somehow or another, his rights certainly may have been affected, but where he hasn't had an adequate opportunity to raise whatever issue he wants before the court decided to enforce the order.
So, Your Honor, if I'm understanding this correctly,
You're not.
the court's going to enter Mr. Bernstein's order under the 728 case, but my 928 case, GZ, set for a show cause at the end of May, as well as the preliminary examination. The court's already issued those notices.
Because those matters haven't been dismissed by the people.
Okay, so the Humane Society cannot do anything with these animals, Your Honor.
That may be your opinion. They may believe that they have something else to do.
Okay, well, Your Honor, they're going to be putting themselves in a very precarious position if they do
That is going to be their business. I appreciate you giving them
Shut
advice,
up.
but I don't know that that's where they get it from.
Okay.
Yeah, this one's for regulars.
So that's where this thing got a little bit bizarre from the court standpoint, because the order I'm enforcing
it got bizarre because this woman thinks she represents a dog.
is only on 728. That's where the original order was entered. Because quite frankly, other than Miss Null's criminal case, the other cases at that point in time did not exist,
Correct, Your Honor.
excluding the York Township matters. So that's the order I'm enforcing. And
Yes, the cases against David Miller did not exist until Big Dummy came in and told him to
be dummy.
make admissions against interest.
I'm not sure that the objection that has been filed by Mr. Miller in that case can be filed, because as I read the court rule, any objection must be filed by a party. And as to that case, he is not a party.
Which is a problem.
Your Honor, that proposed order, the motion, were all filed under Mr. Miller's case. And if there's no then ruling,
Under Mr. Miller's case,
the 928 GZ case, and if the court is then only enforcing this order to the null case and continuing with the show cause, that means there's been no adjudication that Mr. Miller is not an owner. The court speaks through its written orders.
and I will have a written order today, because I'm going to decide, and I have decided, the ownership of these animals.
Oh, yes. He made a finding, and if you don't believe me, you can go. You can go through the Dog Days playlist. It's in there.
Then
Yes, it is, and we did it ourselves here.
My client has full appeal rights as to that issue then.
You can say whatever you want was done. Show it. Because I don't think that he's a party to this case. I told you long ago that if you wanted to come into this case, to intervene. And you went on the joinder bandwagon. Doesn't really matter how it happened, but you never intervened.
Your Honor,
There was never a motion before this court to intervene.
Your Honor, the prosecutor brought a case against my client saying he was the owner. 2 cases.
And that
Yep. Your client's in on that case, not this one.
is going to be for the prosecutor to decide. I've made my ruling as it regards to this in the previous order. I haven't adjudicated those cases, as I see it. So the court is going to, in terms of reconciling to the extent that it is even an objection, but the court's required to have a hearing on it once there is an objection, but the court is going to note specifically that the objection was filed by a non-party to the case that the court is entering it in. And I'm just going to indicate.
Hang with this. She gets more obnoxious. Oh, it gets kind of ugly.
Okay.
And specifically indicate that in reconciling the orders, I don't have to sign either order. The court can sign an order that comports with the court's decision. And so I'm going to do that and specifically indicate that this matter came by way of Ms. Knoll's motion to enforce a previous order entered by this court March 22nd, 2022. The court held an evidentiary hearing where all persons claiming ownerships of the dogs, and I will note, although they did not properly intervene in the case, were given an opportunity to be heard, and the court gave its decision on that, on the ownership of the animals, on the record, and now will issue the following written opinion. It is ordered that Catherine Knoll's motion to enforce the order is granted. It is further ordered that this order covers only the 2 orders titled Order Following Hearing on Animal Forfeiture, which were entered for court case numbers 221C 0728 GC and 21F4 1365 FY. It is further ordered that the only previous owners of the animals was Catherine Knoll, and as such, she alone had the sole lawful authority to consent to the order entered March 22nd, 2022, regarding the disposition of the 4 animals.
Don't worry, she does not accept this order of the court.
Please.
She must continue to talk.
It is further ordered that the animals are forfeited to the Humane Society, to Huron Valley Humane Society, pursuant to that court's order and consent order that was entered on that date, which is being enforced by this order. It is further ordered that the Huron Valley Humane Society shall be the new owners of the 4 dogs, Hazel, Scooby, Brutus, and Coco, and are free to rehome or otherwise decide on their disposition. It is so ordered.
Your Honor, I just want to inform and remind everybody there's an automatic stay pursuant to MCR 2.6.
Counsel, you are not here to give legal advice to the court. If you have something to address on this case, which you are not a party to, you may, but you are not here to do that. So if there's nothing else.
There is, Your Honor, because the court has ruled on 1 case number. Several case numbers against my client exist. The Humane Society has no authority to do anything with these dogs.
You cannot say that, Counsel. You cannot say that. I am done. If you are going to try to contravene the court's order, you may, but at your own peril. I am done. This court is now concluded.
Your Honor, I'd like to complete my record, Judge.
No, you are not. Hold it, Counsel. I have no problem with you.
Look at how much David Miller, top right, is enjoying this. That's her client. I don't know why. He just finds this hilarious. I mean, I do too, but she's not my attorney.
Doing a record. You will not indicate that somebody cannot do something which is in contravention of this court's order. That will not be allowed.
Your Honor, it's not in contravention of the court.
Absolutely is. The words out of your mouth directly contravene what I just said. That will not be permitted. That will not be permitted as part of the record.
Your Honor, just please let me make my record. This is black letter.
If it's an appropriate record, you may, but I will stop you again if you are going to try to usurp this court's authority. Will not happen here, Miss Dunn.
The court has no authority to enforce an order within the...
She's not party to the case that they're talking about.
She's not realizing it. She's not getting it.
She didn't enter an appearance. She didn't file a motion to intervene. She has bupkis. I don't know why he's talking to her.
First 21 days, Judge. No authority.
Then the court rules will be followed.
Thank you, Judge.
And if you want to follow the court rules, that's fine. If somebody doesn't follow the court rules, but you are not here to try to give the world legal advice, this court is adjourned.
Thank you, Judge.
Look at that smile. Well, there you have it. It appears that the cases for Mr. Miller haven't been dismissed yet. I'm sure that I would guess they would be. The court has made a finding that he is not the owner, and therefore that guts those charges, absolutely. But I don't know. I think she might show up when the prosecutor moves to dismiss the cases against her client and object.
Right.
I really think she might do that. So she's associated with a case and can continue to bother Judge Simpson. I think she'll say no. The prosecution has to continue against my client. In literally being the only attorney in the history of the world to make such an argument, because of course in her mind her clients are the dogs. Because she's an animal lawyer. That's what we're dealing with.
Yeah, I believe we are.
Congratulations to Old Squishy.
Yes, it is. And that was Law Talk Mike. If you do want to go ahead and give him some loving, head on over. He is a nice guy. It should be helped and looked out. Looking to see if we have anything else real quick. Let's do this now. Alright, let's do a Judy Hyper case.
Mr. Aragon, Ms. Rosato is your former girlfriend, and you have one child together.
Correct, Judge.
Your lawsuit alleges that Ms. Rosato maliciously filed a restraining order against you, which was dismissed after a hearing, and you want to be compensated for that. Ms. Rosato says that she had not only the right but the responsibility to file for a restraining order, and that the court was mistaken in failing to grant her the restraining order against you. Ms. Rosato, I'm going to start with you because you were the one who filed the restraining order. You and Mr. Aragon separated when?
In June of 2010.
And how old was your daughter at that time?
1.5.
Where were you living in June of 2010?
With Mr. Aragon and his mother.
Where?
In Denver off of Pierce, 48th and Pierce.
How long had you lived with her?
2.5 years at the time.
And when you left Denver, you took your daughter with you?
Yes.
Where did you go?
I was still in Denver, but I went and stayed with my father for a while.
Did Mr. Aragon know your father?
Yes, he did.
How long did you stay with your father?
For about a year.
And did Mr. Aragon see his daughter during that year?
He did not.
Is that correct?
That's correct, Your Honor.
Why?
I'm not too sure why. I tried everything in my power to locate Alexandria with legal documents from the court.
Well, you mean you didn't know she was staying with her father?
No, I had no idea where my daughter was at that time for the whole year.
When you left, Miss Rosato, did you tell Mr. Aragon where you were going?
I did not. I didn't want any confrontation at my father's home. I did, however, try to set up one day and have Mr. Aragon meet with our daughter. And
after how long?
Maybe 2 or 3 months.
That's a long time for somebody who was living with his daughter since her birth.
Yes.
So why would you do that?
I didn't like the situation we were in, and I was afraid for my daughter. We did not have a good relationship at all. It is the whole reason I left. There was violence between us, constant arguing, and I don't think any child should be brought up in that type of a environment.
Okay. Were the police ever called to?
No, ma'am.
During the time that you were together, did you ever file for protective order?
No, I did not.
You did not. So you were arguing and you wanted to leave.
Yes.
And you left and didn't tell him where you were going,
No.
at least for a few months.
Yes.
Then you tried to set up, and how did you try to set up a meeting with Mr. Aragon and his daughter?
I had talked to him on the phone, and I let him know we could meet at a public place, and we did. But when I got there, Mr. Aragon had Serenity in his arms, and he said I could take her from you, and no one would do anything.
That's what you did, wasn't it?
No, ma'am.
Yes, it was. That's exactly what you did. You left your home with your daughter, and you didn't tell him where you were going. He's a parent just like you are. I want you to process that. That's what I'm telling you. In 2010, that's exactly what you did. The two of you were living together and had been living together for 2.5 years. You were arguing. I think you're absolutely right that it's better for a child not to be brought up in a home where there's confrontation. I think you're absolutely right. But I think that there's an orderly way to do that. And the orderly way to do that is not to disappear and go underground so that you're in charge of his daughter. Do you understand?
Yes, ma'am.
Good. So that we understand each other. That's where I'm coming from. It's a neutral playing field. A mother has no more rights than a father. A child has two parents. Okay, so at some point, then he took the child and said I could disappear with her and nobody would know, so that frightened you.
Yes.
Well, I would understand what frightened you, just like it frightened him when he couldn't locate his daughter. So what did you do?
We left at that point.
You left. And Mr. Aragon, when was the next time you saw your daughter?
Your Honor, after that, I didn't see my daughter anymore. I tried to be reasonable with Alexandria. I had no luck with that whatsoever.
What did you do, communicate by the phone?
Yes, I tried to call her on her cell phone. Yes.
When did you finally locate her?
It took me a whole year to find her. It was, I believe, in 2012, I think, when I had got joint custody.
2012?
Yes, I believe so.
And at that time, Ms. Rosado, you had a hearing?
Yes.
In what city and state?
Jefferson County of Colorado.
And where were you living at the time? In Jefferson County?
Yes.
And where were you living?
Denver, Colorado, 45.
Is that far from where she was living?
Yes.
And the conclusion.
So you had a hearing, and after a hearing, you told the judge your side of the story. He told the judge, I'm sure, conducted an investigation. Did the child have a lawyer?
She was appointed...
A law guardian?
Yeah.
And the judge issued an order. And what kind of an order did the judge issue in 2012, Ms. Rosado?
We went into mediation, and we agreed upon a parenting plan.
And what was that parenting plan?
That Mr. Aragon got Serenity from Friday at 3 until Monday at 3.
And how did that work out?
It worked really well.
Until when?
Until almost a year ago.
So from 2012 to 2016?
Yes.
And what happened in 2016?
Mr. Aragon wanted Serenity for more of the school time during the weekday.
Did he go back to court?
We went back into mediation.
And what happened in mediation?
We just changed our days around from Friday to Monday to Thursday till Sunday.
And when did that start?
In June of 2016, I believe.
Did it start in June of 2016, Mr. Aragon, that you saw your daughter from Thursday to Sunday?
Yes.
For how long?
I'm sorry, Your Honor. What do you...
Did you see your child in June, July, August, September?
Yes, I seen her all those months.
When did that change?
Well, it started to change maybe like a year into our parenting plan.
Well, this is June 2016. It couldn't have been a year. When did that change, Ms. Rosado?
January 2017.
And what happened in January of 2017?
Serenity had come home from Mr. Aragon's home, and she was telling me that she hadn't eaten all day.
What time did she come home on Sunday?
6 p.m. So it wasn't like an early morning thing where understandable she hadn't eaten yet. It was an all-day thing. And when I asked her why not, she said Mr. Aragon and his girlfriend were fighting all day. And I asked why she didn't eat still, and she said they didn't feed her.
How old is your daughter?
She is 8 years old.
Did you call Mr. Aragon?
I did not, ma'am.
Why not?
I figured it would be a big confrontation between us. Me and Mr. Aragon do not communicate well at all.
Okay, well, did you go back to the family court?
I did. I tried and...
Just a second. So your daughter comes home at 6 o'clock on Sunday.
Yes.
And tells you she hadn't eaten all day. And then you went to the family court to try to get the order modified?
Yes, ma'am.
On what date did you do that?
I tried all week, but the day was Wednesday the 11th, I believe, when I finally went back into the courtroom for the restraining order.
No. We're not talking about restraining order. We're talking about going back to family court and seeking to modify the custody order.
Yes, ma'am.
To change it and to have a hearing about it.
And that did not happen.
Why not?
I had figured out no way in order to modify the parenting plan that we had in order.
What do you mean you found no way? I don't understand that. What you're saying is he neglected his child on Sunday and didn't feed her all day. That, if it's true, would have been grounds for a judge to hear a modification of the parenting order. Do you understand?
Yes, ma'am.
You did not do that.
Correct.
Instead, you chose to file a protective order against him.
Yes.
So that when he went to pick up his daughter on Thursday from school, they said you can't take her because there's a restraining order against you. That's what happened, and that's why we're here. By the way, when the child came home on Sunday at 6 p.m., that was the time that the child should have been home, 6 o'clock?
Yes.
So he brought her home on time.
Yes, ma'am.
And I assume you did not take her to a hospital, a doctor on Sunday or Monday or Tuesday, otherwise you would have records of that. Correct? Okay, so there was nothing wrong with her that would cause you to go to a doctor.
No, ma'am.
So I'm still confused as to why you didn't seek, since you two of you can't communicate, why you didn't go back into Jefferson County where you were and say, I want to reopen this issue of custody because I don't think that he's taking adequate care of my daughter.
Yes, ma'am. Well,
why didn't you do that?
I tried, and
what
there
happened?
Was no way for me to.
What do you mean there was no way? I don't understand there was no way for you. The same way there was for Mr. Aragon to go in to try to get custody of his daughter. That's the same way you go in.
Yeah, the route he went was to call child services on me.
So let me ask you this question. If the route he went, because you had actually taken his child away from him,
yes,
like you were concerned that he was going to do to you, he called Child Protective. Why didn't you call Child Protective Services and say, this is what my daughter is telling me, and I'd like you to look into it? Why didn't you do that?
I didn't want to go that route.
Well, it was easier to go the route of getting a protective order without anybody interviewing the child, because when you went in for a protective order, nobody interviewed the child, right?
No.
Oh, hold on. I'm sorry. Just a second. I didn't know that, but there's actually a part 3. Now, the conclusion.
They just took you at the face of what you were saying, that he didn't feed her all day, and she came home hungry.
Yes.
Right. Now I'd like to see what you filed against him. And then we're going to find out when you went back to court, ultimately, so he didn't have visitation with his child or his custody time with his child, and you went to court and you had a hearing before a judge, correct?
Yes,
and I assume you told the judge the same thing that you're telling me.
Yes.
And did the child testify?
No. They would not hear her.
Just a second. The child didn't testify. So the judge listened to you, and I assume you testified, Mr. Aragon, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
And the judge dismissed your case.
Yes.
Well, let me tell you what you write here. The allegation is physical assault, threat, or other situation, and this is a story that you tell. Serenity came home and began to tell me that she had not really eaten all day because Ronald and his girlfriend were fighting all day, so she was really hungry. Then you go on to say, Serenity began to tell me that her dad, Ronald, and his girlfriend were fighting and punching each other in the face, so she was concerned about her sister because she didn't want her to get hit. This was at our father Ronald's home in front of Serenity, our daughter and his daughter. You didn't tell me that. You told me only about hungry.
Yes, ma'am.
When the court asked you to testify, Ms. Rosado, did you tell them both things, both about the hungry and about what your daughter said about them fighting with each other? Okay, you didn't tell that to me.
I apologize.
Okay, right. And then the judge dismissed your case because he didn't believe you.
No, he dismissed it because all I had was the hearsay.
He dismissed it because he didn't believe it.
The whole reason he granted the temporary
No, the
protection
reason
order.
the judge granted the temporary order of protection is because judges usually grant a temporary order of protection because they err on the side of being cautious because they really don't know. Maybe he's really a nut. Maybe the child was really in danger. Then he saw both of you and he said, no, that's not what I'm seeing here. Now, was that the same judge that reinstated the visitation situation, the custody situation? So the same judge, after that judge heard you, reverted back to him picking up his daughter on Thursday.
Yes.
Until Sunday.
Yes.
And how has that been going?
It's not been going too well, Your Honor. If I may say something about January 8th, the thing that happened on January 8th is me and my fiancée Roxanne sitting here today, we were discussing our daughter's birthday party. We were discussing whether we were going to have cake or cake pops for her birthday. My grandma, my mother, and Roxanne, as well as Serenity, was present. There was no incident that took place that day. There was no police that came to my home that day. And
all I want to know is why haven't you been seeing your daughter from Thursday to Sunday?
Well, Alexandria gives me a really hard time with that sometimes. Usually when I go pick up Serenity as a scheduled day on Thursday, she usually keeps her from me to where I have to call the police. And when I call the police, they tell me they can't help me with anything because...
Well, don't you pick her up from school?
Yes, but sometimes she won't send her to school.
You mean on Thursday?
Yes.
How many times has that happened since the temporary order of protection was dismissed?
At least like 2 to 3 times since it's been dismissed.
What's been wrong with your daughter on Thursdays?
That is not true. She has been at school every Thursday. We have had no incidents.
So
since then.
is what you're telling me, Ms. Rosato, that in the months of February and March, that Mr. Aragon has not missed period of custody with his daughter?
No, ma'am, he has not.
Is that correct?
No.
Have you, in the month of February and the month of March, contacted the police with regard to...
Yes, I have.
Which police department?
It was Denver Police Department, and then I also had to contact Jefferson Police Department because she lives in Jefferson County.
That's very easy to find out.
Yes, ma'am.
Damn, I did not think this had this many parts. Hold on. Let me see if I can find part 4. Alright, here we go.
Ronald Aragon has accused the mother of his child, Alexandria Rosato, of filing a false restraining order and defaming his character.
Now, did you file a report? Was that on a Thursday?
Yes, and there was no report filed. Every time a police officer came out to assist me, they said they couldn't help me because the parenting plan didn't have enough information to where they could physically remove Serenity from her care to give to me.
What do you mean? Do you have a copy of the parenting plan? I'd like
Yes.
to take a look at it. Do you have joint legal custody?
Yes, Your Honor.
Joint legal custody.
Yes.
So, Mr. Aragon, you can call your daughter's school and get information with regard to whether your daughter has been out any Thursday in the month of February
Yes.
or March. And what you're telling me is your daughter was, in fact, out of school on Thursday so that you couldn't go and get her from school, which is where he's supposed to pick her up, correct?
Yes.
Good. And you understand, Ms. Rosato, that you've just told me that your daughter never missed a Thursday in February and March. You
Yes,
told me
ma'am.
that. Great. So that would help me out a little bit, just to figure out exactly what's been happening currently after the order of protection. Do you understand?
Yes.
I want you to call the school because you have joint legal custody, correct?
Yes,
So
Your
go
Honor.
outside and do that.
Yep.
And I want from the school, they can fax here, just a report on whether or not your daughter was in school every Thursday in February and March.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes, no, Your Honor. I'm really sorry. I've just been under a lot of stress going through everything with Alexandria. The only day that I didn't pick Serenity up was on Thursday in January. Other than that, she was showing up, but there was some complications because she would...
Just a minute. You see how easy that was?
Yes, Your Honor.
So that since that order has been reinstated,
Yes.
you have been picking your daughter up every Thursday, and the only date that you missed was in January.
Yes.
Very good. That makes a big difference, Ms. Rosato. It makes a big difference in the amount of money I'm going to award him. Because if you had not brought your daughter to school on Thursday after this hearing on your application for an order of protection, I would have awarded Mr. Aragon the $5,000 that he's asking for. Now I'm going to award him $2,500 because the route that you took in order to satisfy yourself was the wrong one. It was the same kind of route that you took in 2010 which was, she's my daughter. I get to say what goes on with her without involving a neutral arbitrator. Do you understand? You can't do that. Child has two parents. And what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to say, there's no question that my daughter is not at risk. Because if she was at risk, she would have been at a doctor's office Monday morning. She's not at risk, and she lived with her father for a year and a half when she was a baby. And then you disappeared with her because you wanted to. And then when you were questioning her, which is what you probably do when she comes back from her father's house, and you got either a story or a non-story, whatever it was, you chose not to call Child Protective Services and say my child's being neglected. You chose not to go back to the family court. You chose to go the route of getting an ex parte protective order, probably with some advice from somebody. I'm not sure who. Anyway, judgment for the plaintiff in the amount of $2,500. We're done.
Thank you, Judge Judy. And with that, we will bring a close to our first episode of the day. Come back, of course, for the evening. I think we're going to go old school tonight with some old flat earthers. We haven't touched them in a while, so it should be good to raise my blood level a little bit for people who don't think we live on our nice little globe that we do live on. And, of course, then Art Bell in the overnight, final part of the Graham interview, the first episode of Midnight in the Desert. So again, please make sure you do like, share, and subscribe. Be kind to one another, and release the Krakens as we approach closer and closer to that 50,000 goal so we can get those nice red boxes to send to you here from day one. Have a great afternoon. We'll see you tonight.